The world feels like it's spinning out of control. Every morning you wake up to headlines that make your chest tighten with anxiety. Wars rage across distant continents, while their effects ripple through global markets. Economic uncertainty looms, like storm clouds, threatening the stability you've worked so hard to build. Climate change presents challenges that seem too vast for any individual to comprehend, let alone address. Political systems crack under pressure while social media amplifies every fear, every doubt, every catastrophic prediction about what tomorrow might bring. In moments like these, when the ground beneath our feet feels unsteady, when the future seems shrouded in fog, we need something more than hope. We need wisdom. We need tools. We need a philosophy that has already weathered 2,000 years of human uncertainty and emerged stronger for it. Close your eyes and imagine sitting in a quiet garden in ancient Rome, just as the sun begins to set behind marble columns. The air is still, carrying only the distant sounds of a bustling city going about its evening rituals. Across from you sits a figure whose face bears the weight of immense responsibility, yet whose eyes hold a profound peace. This is Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, the most powerful man in the world. Writing by candlelight in his personal journal after another day of managing an empire under siege, his words scratched onto parchment with deliberate care weren't meant for anyone else to read. They were reminders to himself, meditations on how to remain centered when everything around him threatened to pull him into chaos. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he writes, his pen moving with the confidence of someone who has tested this truth against the harshest realities. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is not merely philosophy for philosophy's sake. This is a battle-tested framework for human resilience, forged in the crucible of real uncertainty, real loss, real fear. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plagues that decimated populations. Seneca navigated the treacherous politics of imperial Rome, surviving exile and eventually facing execution. Epictetus knew slavery, disability, and the complete loss of personal freedom. Yet from their struggles emerged a philosophy so powerful, so practical, that it continues to offer refuge to anyone willing to embrace its principles. Tonight, in this moment, as the weight of modern uncertainty presses down upon millions of shoulders around the world, their wisdom calls out across the centuries like a lighthouse beam cutting through the darkness. The first truth they would have us understand is perhaps the most liberating and the most challenging. The fundamental distinction between what lies within our control and what lies beyond it. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean during a storm. The waves crash. With tremendous force, the wind howls, with seemingly infinite power, and the horizon disappears into gray uncertainty. A person untrained in Stoic wisdom might exhaust themselves trying to calm the waters, shouting at the wind or demanding that the storm abate simply because they need it to. But the Stoics see something different. They recognize that while they cannot control the storm, they have absolute sovereignty over their response to it. They can choose their thoughts about the storm, can choose their actions in the face of it. They can choose whether to waste energy fighting forces beyond their reach or to focus entirely on what remains within their power. This principle transforms everything. When financial markets collapse, you cannot single-handedly restore global economic stability, but you can control how you prepare, how you adapt, how you respond to the changes that affect your life directly. When political turmoil erupts, you cannot force entire populations to embrace unity, but you can control your own civic engagement, your own commitment to your values, your own treatment of those around you. When climate change presents challenges that span decades and require global cooperation, cannot reverse centuries of industrial activity overnight. But you can control your own choices, your own consumption patterns, your own contribution to solutions within your sphere of influence. Epictetus, who understood powerlessness more intimately than most, taught his students to practice this distinction daily. He would have them imagine their day ahead and systematically categorize each challenge they might face. Will other people approve of your decisions today? Not up to you. Will the economy recover quickly? Not up to you. Will global conflicts resolve peacefully? Not up to you. But will you act with integrity regardless of approval? Completely up to you. Will you make wise financial decisions with whatever resources you have? It's completely up to you. Will you treat others with respect and contribute positively to your community? Completely up to you. This exercise, practiced daily, gradually builds what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, the ability to want only what you can actually control and to find peace in the surrender of everything else. But this surrender is not passive resignation. It is the strategic focusing of all your energy, all your attention, all your efforts onto the battlefield where you actually have power to make a difference. Think of a skilled archer in ancient times, standing before a target in a crosswind. An amateur archer might become frustrated with the wind, might waste arrows trying to overpower it, or might give up entirely when conditions aren't perfect. But a master archer studies the wind carefully, accepts it as part of the challenge, then adjusts their aim and technique accordingly. They don't fight the wind, they work with it. They don't blame the wind for missed shots, they take responsibility for their preparation, their stance, their release. This is the Stoic approach to uncertainty, not fighting the uncontrollable forces of change, but becoming so skilled in the areas where we do have control that we can succeed regardless of external conditions. Seneca, who lived through the reigns of 5 different emperors and witnessed the dramatic political upheavals that came with each transition of power, understood that security built on external circumstances is no security at all. He watched wealthy families lose everything overnight when political winds shifted. He saw powerful officials exiled or executed when they fell out of favor. He observed how those who tied their well-being to circumstances beyond their control, livid, in constant anxiety, always at the mercy of forces they couldn't predict or influence. Yet he also noticed something remarkable about those few individuals who had built their security on different foundations. These were people who had cultivated inner resources, wisdom, virtue, resilience, perspective that no external force could touch. They faced the same uncertainties as everyone else, but they faced them from a position of strength that no emperor could grant and no market crash could destroy. This inner security begins with a practice Seneca called premeditatio. Malorum, the premeditation of evils. This is not pessimism or catastrophic thinking. It is the methodical mental rehearsal of challenges so that when they arrive, as they inevitably do, you meet them not with shock and panic, but with prepared composure. Imagine a firefighter who has trained extensively in simulation exercises, practicing rescue techniques until they become second nature. When an actual emergency occurs, they don't waste precious time being surprised or overwhelmed. Their training kicks in automatically, and they respond with practiced effectiveness. The Stoic practices premeditatio malorum in the same way, mentally rehearsing how they would maintain their values and their peace. Well, if various challenges were to arise, picture yourself sitting quietly in the early morning hours, when the world is still soft with dawn light and your mind is clear from sleep. In this stillness, you gently consider what you would do if certain uncertainties became realities. How would you maintain your principles if economic hardship affected your family? What would you focus on if political developments created social tension in your community? How would you find meaning and purpose if health challenges limited your physical capabilities? This is not an exercise in worry, it is an exercise in preparation. You're not dwelling on negative possibilities with anxiety, but rather building confidence in your ability to handle whatever life might present. You're creating mental muscle memory for resilience. The power of this practice becomes evident when unexpected challenges actually arise. Instead of being caught off guard, you find yourself thinking clearly, accessing strategies you've already considered, drawing on inner resources you've already identified. The shock that paralyzes others becomes for you simply the activation of preparations you've already made. This is how Marcus Aurelius could write calmly about philosophy, even while managing military campaigns against barbarian invasions. This is how Seneca could maintain his dignity and composure even when facing exile and eventual execution. They had mentally rehearsed adversity so thoroughly that when it arrived, it found them ready. But readiness is only part of the equation. The Stoics also understood that resilience must be actively cultivated through voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing small hardships in order to build strength for larger ones. This practice, which they sometimes called ascesis, is like cross-training for the soul. An athlete doesn't wait until race day to test their endurance. They push their limits in training, gradually increasing their capacity so that the actual competition finds them prepared. Similarly, the Stoic doesn't wait for involuntary hardship to discover their breaking point. They create controlled challenges that build their tolerance for discomfort and their confidence in their ability to persist through difficulty. This might mean taking cold showers to build tolerance for physical discomfort, knowing that this small daily practice strengthens your overall resilience to unexpected hardships. It might mean occasionally sleeping on the floor or eating simple meals, not out of asceticism for its own sake, but to prove to yourself that your well-being doesn't depend on luxury or comfort. It might mean deliberately choosing difficult conversations or challenging tasks that stretch your capacity for courage and persistence. Each of these small acts of voluntary discomfort is a deposit in what you might think of as your resilience bank account resources. You can draw upon when life presents challenges you didn't choose. Seneca regularly practiced this principle by periodically living as if he were poor, eating simple food, wearing plain clothes, sleeping without luxury. He wasn't punishing himself or rejecting prosperity, but rather ensuring that his happiness and peace weren't held hostage by external circumstances. He wanted to know, not theoretically, but practically, that he could maintain his dignity and contentment even if he lost all his material possessions. This knowledge became a source of tremendous freedom. When you know you can be happy with less, you stop being afraid of losing what you have. When you know you can handle discomfort, uncertainty stops being quite so frightening. As you build this foundation of inner strength through voluntary practice, simultaneously develop what might be called the view from above, the ability to step back from immediate circumstances and see them within a larger context. Marcus Aurelius often practiced this by imagining himself rising high above the earth, looking down at human activities from the perspective of cosmic time and space. From this vantage point, the political crises and economic fluctuations that seemed so overwhelming at ground level appeared as temporary disturbances in a much larger pattern of change that has been unfolding for millennia. This practice isn't meant to make you indifferent to real suffering or genuine problems. Rather, it helps you distinguish between problems that deserve your emotional energy and those that drain you without providing any constructive outlet for action. When you can see current uncertainties within the context of the vast sweep of human history, you realize that people have faced similar challenges before and have found ways to not only survive, but to create meaning and beauty even in the midst of difficulty. Wars have been fought and peace has been restored. Economies have collapsed and been rebuilt. Diseases have spread and been conquered. Governments have fallen and new forms of organization have emerged. Throughout all of these cycles, humans have continued to find ways to love their families, contribute to their communities, create art, discover truth, and live with dignity. This perspective allows you to hold two realities simultaneously: the genuine significance of current challenges and the deeper truth that these challenges are part of a larger human story that includes both tremendous difficulty and remarkable resilience. You can take action on problems within your sphere of influence while maintaining the kind of emotional equilibrium that allows for wise decision-making. Rather than reactive panic, you can care deeply about outcomes while holding lightly to your need to control them. The Stoics understood that this balance requires daily practice. It's not just in times of crisis, but especially during periods of relative calm. They developed specific techniques for training attention and building philosophical muscle memory that would serve them when external pressures mounted. One of the most powerful of these practices was evening reflection, a systematic review of the day's events, thoughts, and responses designed to extract wisdom from experience and to prepare the mind for continued growth. Imagine ending each day with a few minutes of quiet contemplation. reviewing the hours that have passed with the gentle curiosity of a scientist studying an interesting experiment. What moments today called for courage, and how did you respond? When did you feel pulled into anxiety about things beyond your control, and what helped you return to focusing on your sphere of influence? What opportunities did you have to practice patience, kindness, or wisdom, and how might you handle similar situations differently in the future? This isn't self-judgment or criticism, but rather the kind of thoughtful analysis that turns raw experience into practical wisdom. Seneca practiced this reflection by writing letters to his friend Lucilius, using their correspondence as an opportunity to think through philosophical principles and their practical applications. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal, recording thoughts and reminders that helped him stay centered amid the demands of ruling an empire. Epictetus engaged in this kind of reflection through dialogue with his students, constantly examining how philosophical principles could be applied to real-world challenges. Each of these approaches served the same purpose, transforming daily experiences into opportunities for growth and understanding. Through this practice of reflection, you begin to notice patterns in your own responses to uncertainty. You start to identify the early warning signs that your peace of mind is being disturbed by things beyond your control. You develop greater sensitivity to the moments when you have real opportunities to influence outcomes versus the moments when your energy would be better directed toward acceptance and adaptation. Most importantly, you begin to see evidence of your own growth, moments when you responded with greater wisdom than you might have in the past. Situations where Stoic principles helped you maintain your equilibrium when you might previously have been overwhelmed. This growing self-awareness creates space for one of the most transformative aspects of Stoic practice, the cultivation of gratitude, even in the midst of uncertainty. This is not the superficial gratitude that ignores real problems or minimizes genuine difficulties. Rather, it is the mature recognition that even in challenging times, there remain aspects of existence worthy of appreciation, and that focusing attention on these elements strengthens your capacity to address difficulties effectively. The Stoic practice of gratitude begins with what Marcus Aurelius called the fundamental recognition that you exist at all, that you have been given the extraordinary gift of consciousness, of the ability to think and feel and choose and create. In a universe that is mostly empty space and unconscious matter, the simple fact that you can contemplate your existence, can experience beauty, can form relationships, can make moral choices, this alone is remarkable beyond measure. It is basic. Gratitude for existence itself becomes an unshakable foundation that persists regardless of external circumstances. From this foundation, gratitude extends to the specific gifts that remain available even during uncertain times. You can still appreciate the taste of food, the warmth of sunlight, the complexity of a piece of music, the comfort of friendship. You can still experience the satisfaction that comes from learning something new, helping someone in need, creating something beautiful, or simply being present to a moment of ordinary peace. These experiences don't disappear because of global uncertainty. They remain available as sources of strength and renewal. Perhaps most importantly, Stoic gratitude includes appreciation for challenges themselves as opportunities for growth. This might seem paradoxical, but consider how physical exercise works. Muscles become stronger only when they encounter resistance that pushes them beyond their current capacity. Similarly, character qualities like courage, patience, wisdom, and resilience can only be developed by facing situations that call for these virtues. From this perspective, periods of uncertainty become valuable training grounds rather than simply obstacles to endure. Epictetus, drawing on his own experience of extreme hardship, taught his students to reframe difficulties as opportunities to practice philosophy in real-world conditions. A financial setback becomes a chance to practice detachment from material possessions. A health challenge becomes an opportunity to discover inner sources of strength. Political turmoil becomes a classroom for learning how to maintain your values. When external pressures encourage compromise, this reframing doesn't eliminate the genuine difficulty of these situations, but it adds a layer of meaning and purpose that transforms suffering into something productive. This transformation of perspective leads naturally to what might be called the discipline of love, the Stoic understanding that, even in an uncertain world, the choice to extend care and compassion remains entirely within your control. Aurelius, despite bearing enormous political responsibilities and facing constant challenges to his authority, consistently returned to the principle that his fundamental duty was to serve the common good, to treat all people as part of a larger human family, and to respond to others' flaws and mistakes with patience rather than judgment. This discipline becomes particularly powerful during times of social tension and conflict, when uncertainty breeds fear and fear breeds anger, the choice to respond with understanding rather than hostility becomes both more difficult and more important. The Stoic recognizes that other people's anxiety and reactive behavior often stems from the same sense of powerlessness that affects everyone during uncertain times. Rather than adding to the cycle of negativity, you can choose to be a source of calm strength in your interactions with others. This doesn't mean becoming passive, failing to stand up for important principles. Rather, it means approaching conflicts and disagreements from a position of centered strength rather than reactive emotion. You can disagree with others' choices while still treating them with basic respect. You can work to influence outcomes you care about while remaining emotionally detached from your need to control other people's responses. You can maintain your boundaries and standards while extending compassion to those who are struggling. This balance of strength and compassion becomes particularly relevant when dealing with the overwhelming nature of global problems: climate change, economic inequality, political polarization, international conflicts. These challenges can seem so vast and complex that individual actions feel meaningless. The natural human response is often either anxious hyperactivation, trying to solve problems far beyond any individual's capacity, or depressed withdrawal, giving up entirely in the face of apparently insurmountable difficulties. The Stoic response is different. It begins with radical acceptance of the scope and complexity of these challenges. Combined with clear-eyed recognition of what falls within your personal sphere of influence, you cannot single-handedly solve climate change, but you can make thoughtful choices about your own consumption, support policies and organizations that align with your values, and model sustainable practices for others in your community. You cannot eliminate economic inequality. You can treat service workers with respect, support local businesses, volunteer with organizations that help people in need, and use whatever resources you have in ways that contribute positively to your community. This approach requires what Seneca called the long view, the ability to work steadily toward positive change without needing to see immediate large-scale results. You plant seeds, not because you expect to harvest fruit tomorrow, but because you understand that meaningful change often happens slowly, through the accumulated effect of many individual choices made by many people over extended periods of time. Your contribution matters not because it will single-handedly solve massive problems, but because it represents your commitment to being part of solutions rather than part of problems. This long view also helps with managing the emotional weight of staying informed about global events. The Stoic doesn't ignore what's happening in the world, but neither do they consume news in ways that promote anxiety without enabling constructive action. They stay informed enough to make wise decisions and to understand how they can contribute positively, but they avoid the kind of compulsive news consumption that generates emotional turmoil without providing any outlet for meaningful response. The key is learning to engage with information about global challenges the way a doctor engages with information about a patient's condition. It's with serious attention to facts and careful consideration of treatment options, but without the kind of emotional involvement that would compromise their ability to think clearly and act effectively. You can care deeply about global problems while maintaining the emotional equilibrium. It's necessary for sustained positive action. This sustainable engagement with difficulty extends to how you think about the future itself. One of the most destabilizing aspects of uncertainty is the tendency to project current anxieties indefinitely into the future, imagining that present challenges will continue to grow worse without limit. The mind, trying to protect you by preparing for danger, can become trapped in cycles of catastrophic thinking that generate far more suffering than actual events usually do. The Stoic antidote to this tendency is the practice of focusing on present responsibilities while holding the future lightly. You make reasonable preparations and work steadily toward positive goals. But you don't tie your peace of mind to specific outcomes unfolding according to your timeline and preferences. You understand that the future will contain both challenges and opportunities that you cannot predict. And you prepare by building general resilience and wisdom rather than trying to plan for every possible scenario. This approach allows you to take appropriate action on long-term concerns without becoming paralyzed by anxiety about unknowable futures. You can save money for retirement without spending years worrying about market volatility. You can work on environmental issues without being overwhelmed by apocalyptic scenarios. You can engage in civic life without being consumed by fears about political developments. In each case, you do what you reasonably can in the present moment, and return your attention to the immediate opportunities for positive action that each day provides. Marcus Aurelius captured this balance beautifully. In his personal writings, confine yourself to the present, not because the future doesn't matter, but because the present moment is where your power to influence the future actually resides. The decisions you make today, the character you build through today's choices, the relationships you strengthen, through today's interactions, these become the foundation from which you'll meet whatever tomorrow brings. This focus on present responsibility creates what you might think of as a growing sphere of positive influence. As you consistently make wise choices in small matters, you develop the judgment and strength necessary for handling larger challenges. As you treat the people immediately around you with respect and kindness, you create ripple effects that extend beyond what you can directly observe. As you maintain your values and principles, even when external pressures encourage compromise, you model integrity in ways that inspire others to do the same. The beautiful paradox is that this approach, which begins with accepting the limits of your control, ultimately increases your actual influence in the world. By focusing your energy entirely on areas where you genuinely have power to make a difference, rather than scattering it across concerns you cannot effectively address, you become much more effective at creating positive change. By maintaining your emotional equilibrium, instead of being constantly reactive to circumstances, you become a source of calm strength that others can rely on. By developing genuine inner security, rather than depending on external circumstances, for your peace of mind, you become free to take appropriate risks and make necessary sacrifices for important causes. This is the promise that Stoic philosophy holds out to anyone willing to embrace its disciplines. Not that external circumstances will become easier or more predictable, but that you will become increasingly capable of thriving regardless of what external circumstances might bring. The uncertain world remains uncertain, but your response to uncertainty becomes steady, wise, and purposeful. Global challenges remain complex and difficult, but your contribution to addressing them becomes clear and sustainable. The future remains unknowable, but your preparation for whatever it might contain becomes thorough and realistic. As you sit with these ideas in the quiet of your own reflection, perhaps you can sense the shift in perspective that they offer. The anxieties that felt overwhelming when viewed through the lens of trying to control uncontrollable circumstances begin to seem more manageable. When filtered through the discipline of focusing only on your sphere of influence, the global problems that seemed impossibly large when approached from a place of emotional reactivity begin to suggest specific opportunities for meaningful contribution when approached from a position of centered strength. This is not about becoming indifferent to suffering or withdrawing from engagement with the world's difficulties. Rather, it's about engaging more effectively by ensuring that your responses come from a place of wisdom rather than fear, strength rather than anxiety, and sustainable commitment rather than reactive urgency. It's about recognizing that your capacity to contribute positively to the world depends on your ability to maintain your own center, to think clearly, to act with consistency, and to persist through difficulties without losing sight of your deeper purposes. The ancient Stoics faced uncertainties every bit as daunting as those we face today. They lived through plagues, invasions, political upheavals, economic collapses, and social transformations. They knew exile, imprisonment, disability, and death. Yet from their experiences emerged not cynicism or despair, but a philosophy of tremendous hope, hope based not on the expectation that external circumstances would improve, but on the reliable possibility that human beings can develop the inner resources necessary to create meaning, beauty, and positive change, regardless of external circumstances. This hope is not naive optimism. It is the mature confidence that comes from understanding how much genuine power lies within your control. Even when the world around you seems chaotic and unpredictable, it is the deep satisfaction that comes from living according to your values rather than being constantly reactive to circumstances. It is the peace that comes from building your security on foundations that no external force can shake. Tonight, as you prepare to sleep, perhaps you can carry with you this ancient wisdom made new, that regardless of what tomorrow's headlines might bring, regardless of what global uncertainties might unfold, you have within yourself everything necessary to meet those challenges with dignity, wisdom, and strength. The Stoic practices of focusing on your sphere of control, preparing mentally for difficulties, building resilience through voluntary discomfort, maintaining perspective through reflection, cultivating gratitude even in difficult times, and extending compassion to others, these disciplines remain available to you each day, creating a foundation of inner stability that can support not only your own well-being, but also your capacity to contribute positively to the world around you. The philosophers of ancient Rome offer you not escape from uncertainty, but mastery within it. Not control over external circumstances, but sovereignty over your internal responses. Not guarantees about the future, but confidence in your ability to meet whatever that future might contain. This is their gift across the centuries. The knowledge that peace, strength, and purpose remain possible even when the world feels like it's spinning out of control. The only question that remains is whether you will accept this gift and begin the daily practice that makes it real.